01700. And by the way, those will be the numbers you'll use to be a part of this evening's discussion. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. With regard to your participation in the show, we encourage you to call in on the numbers listed 1-869-469-1616 and 01700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that when you get on the show, you're well organized and you take as little time as possible so we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we're doing that's not within our broadcast standards. But we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Also, you can follow us on our video stream live on our Facebook page at Vaughn Radio and our YouTube channel on Vaughn Radio. Click subscribe. Thank you all again for joining us. Your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. As promised, we'll be speaking with an author, Division author. He wrote a book, and I promise you, as advertised, that it's a great read, and you will find it as enthralling, as much fun, relaxation as I did. Guarantee you that you will hear more about it. Our author is from the St. James Parish here in Nevis. It's not the first time he's been on Talk That Get Results, but in different capacities. It's so good to have you. Good evening, Mr. Nolan.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to all listeners who are listening at this time to Vaughn Radio, whether by way of the radio or by the internet. And it's a pleasure being here this evening, and I also would like to thank Webbo for giving me the opportunity for launching my book this evening. And my book, the name, Growing Up in Nevis. And it basically talks about what it was like growing up in Nevis between the 50s and the 70s when I left and went to Canada. So it gives a good demonstration of what life was like. We used to think that it was the ordinary way of life. But when we look back today, we realize the hardships that we had gone through. But it was normal to us. And, I'll talk a little more about it as we go along.
Okay, and let's do a little background on you. We will talk about that as we go along, because the whole book describes and says basically who you are, and it shapes you growing up in Nevis. But I mentioned earlier that you have been on Talk That Get Results before in a different capacity, and we also know that I don't know if you still are, but you were a member of one of your community groups, Mount Lily Club or something?
Yeah, the Fountain and Mount Lily Community Group, and I'm also the president of the Returning Nationals of Nevis.
Right, and also the Returning Nationals of Nevis, that's still going, right?
Yes, it's still.
Okay, the Returning Nationals of Nevis, we're not here to talk about that, but that's a group that involves and includes mainly Nevisians who had some experience abroad, but also people who continue to live here all their lives, right?
That's right. That's right. Anyone can be a member.
Okay, now we're going to get basically to the book now. You are from the St. James area, Nevis.
St. James, more than likely from the Combermere area also.
The Combermere area.
And to define it, Mount Lily.
Mount Lily. Well, why did you tag Combermere onto Mount Lily? It borders it?
Yeah, actually, Combermere, or Mount Lily is part of Combermere. The people from Mount Lily, we even go as far as to go to the Combermere Methodist Church. We are members of that church, and we had all gone to Combermere School, so we were part and parcel of Combermere.
Right. Well, I ask you to to differentiate or outline that, because a lot of people don't know. Because you'll hear Mount Lily, you'll hear Combermere, you'll hear camps. And then, as you said, you have the Combermere School, and then you have the Combermere Methodist Church, for instance, which is further down the road. So all it encompasses one, right?
That's right.
Okay. And, yes, go ahead. You had pointed out Mount Lily quite a bit in your book. And where you lived is called Mount Lily.
Where I lived was Mount Lily.
Okay, so I'm going to do something here. And I always have the habit of doing things differently, right? In the book, you mentioned about your siblings, your parents and all that, and we will get to all that. But you mentioned your older brother.
That's right, my older brother Orville. He was one of the persons that kind of, if I would say, directed my life in the early years. And sometimes there were positives and sometimes there were negatives. And you'll also see those in the book.
Right. So, at my behest, I'd ask you if we cannot ask Orville to say hello.
Yes,
Right?
I'm sure he would like to.
Right. Because I also know Orville, know the family and stuff like that. And then, so Orville came along with you. And so the book is authentic.
Yes.
Because you mentioned how he guided you. Sometimes for the positive and sometimes for the negative.
That's right.
And here's a clear example, because you're here to release the book and he's with you.
That's right.
So there you go. So let's say good evening to Orville. Orville, get a little closer to the microphone. Yes. Okay, so Orville, good evening. It's good to have you.
Good evening. Glad to be here with both.
Okay, and you have heard all that he's said so far, and you endorse it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Nothing. Well, let me just see if I can get some little volume on your microphone, and then we will come back. We will continue with you. Okay. So let me just continue with Linnell, and then we'll get back to Orville. So I'm going to try and get some more volume on his microphone. Okay. So Linnell, you're from the Mount Lily area, right?
That's right.
That's where you live. And then also we'll want to hear about that village a little more, because somehow it doesn't get as much publicity as, let's say, Fountain and maybe Brookfield and Newcastle, maybe in the St. James area. Is it a smaller village?
Well, right now, Webbo, it's a smaller village, but when I grew up in the 50s, the 60s, Mount Lily was one of the biggest villages in the area. It was so big, Webbo, and so many children lived in Mount Lily that we actually, when we had cricket teams, we had two cricket teams, Upper Mount Lily and Lower Mount Lily. It just showed the number of people that were in Mount Lily. It was a very big village at that time, but since then, for whatever reason, a lot of people have migrated. And so, right now, we don't even have many people of childbearing age in Mount Lily. Very, very few.
Right. That is what I wanted to, one of the things I wanted to bring out, because I think that a lot of people would not imagine the numbers that used to live in that particular area. And that seemed to be an area that was heavily drained with migration.
That's right. Imagine, Webbo, and I wrote it in the book, the only midwife that was in our area, from Combermere all the way up to Butler's, was Nurse Melvina Jeffers, and she came from Mount Lily.
Right.
So whenever persons were having children and you saw her in your village, the talk at the time was, who is having a baby?
And that's important there, because she serviced that large area.
That very large area.
And if you look at it these days, unless 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000, you don't have midwives in the villages now delivering babies.
That's right.
And they weren't doctors, but they did an excellent job, right?
The doctors were there, very few doctors at the time. But Melvina Jeffers, her husband, Marsh Jeffers, he was the sexton of the Cumberland Methodist Church. He was also a local doctor, if I would say, because if your kneecap came off, was out of place, there is where you went to get it put back into place.
Oh, really?
Yes. And if you wanted your tooth pulled, because you know sometimes teeth only hurt when night comes, that's where you went to, and he would pull your tooth without any kind of anesthesia or anything like that. But he was like a little local doctor there.
And local doctor also meaning the medication or the that he used.
No, he didn't use any medication.
When I say medication, I use the term medication so that the young people will understand what's a better word for that? The treatment that he used was local as well.
Well, he himself, he didn't use any treatment.
So what?
Basically, he pulled your tooth.
Okay. So your local doctor in the terms of dentist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we have Orville sorted out. So we can now say again to Orville. Orville, hello and good evening. It's good to have you.
Yes, good evening, Webbo. It's good to be here with my brother, Linnell.
Okay, right. So that's much better. And so he had said, and you endorsed what he had said so far, and he said that he guided you, and you guided him along the way. Sometimes, better, but now and then, not so. Correct?
That's what he said.
That's what he said. But just checking with you.
Well, but there were times when my father would send us to the mountain lands or to the pasture, and he would warn us not to stay to play cricket. But Orville was always the person who loved cricket. And so when we were going or coming from looking after the animals, he would say, let's just get one game. But his one game always end up to more. So by the time we got home, my father would have realized by sending one of the girls to check to see if we were there playing cricket. So by the time we got home, we're going to get licks. And it wasn't just him alone. It was the two of us going to get a beating.
But it was the two of you who stayed to play cricket, notwithstanding he influenced it.
I was forced to, because if I went home, they would know that he's up there playing cricket, because they would ask me where he is. So I will have to say, because those days, young children don't tell lies.
So you took punishment.
So I took punishment for him.
For his sake.
Yeah.
Okay. And he loves cricket so much, that one.
He loved cricket so much, and I have certain things mentioned in the book about him and his cricket. He went to the Virgin Islands and ended up being the scorer for the St. Thomas cricket team. And you know how he became scorer? I did mention it in the book also. Is that one day he was fielding in long off, and for some reason a ball came and he dropped the ball. So the captain wasn't too happy, and the captain said, okay, can you go a little further out? And he kept mentioning to him, until he reached across the boundary. When he went over the boundary, the captain said, "Stay there," and brought in someone else.
So he wasn't too happy about
He
that.
wasn't too happy
I would
about
think.
that, and that's how he became the scorer, because he was no longer a player, and he traveled all over the Virgin Islands, Saint Martin, Tortola, Montserrat, up in Dominica, following around with the cricket team, the St. Thomas cricket team, just doing scoring.
And nobody replaced him.
No,
So he found him.
after he left
After he
St.
left.
Thomas, that's when he was
Right.
replaced.
I remembered him when I was in St. Thomas, living there and playing cricket. I remembered him moving around, very ardent, cricket supporter and cricket fan. But the part of when he got keep going, that part I think was real funny. So, Arvil, what do you say? That's true. I want to make sure he's not making up stuff.
Well,
Could you get a little closer to the mic, Ryan?
well, being a comedian, I made up that, and myself,
Oh, you made it up.
and myself.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I think you made it up on yourself and you told him.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you. Okay. You see how I just get to the bottom of things?
I see.
Anyway, Orville, is good to have you, and it's good to see you, and it's always good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Lionel, let's go back now to other stuff in the book. One of the things you mentioned in terms of the way life was, and you grew up with an older brother, but you had some sisters.
Yes.
Mostly. And I think as I was reading, the area that your house was, your household in Mount Lily, it was almost in the middle.
In the middle.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was right in the middle of Mount Lily, right where the water crosses the road. And there used to be some very big stones down by our gap, right at the road area. And so the boys from Upper Mount Lily and Lower Mount Lily would gather at that point at nights. And we would talk all kind of different things, all kind of on different topics. The good part about it, at no time did you ever hear a foul language or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was very clean conversations and so forth. The younger ones, of course, let me say the older ones, at some point they reach a stage where they would be talking about girlfriends and whatnot. But whenever that type of conversation came up, we would always want to get rid of the younger ones. So then the older ones would start to talk about things like Jumbie and Jack-o'-lantern and things like that. And once they started those conversations, we will just see the younger ones just ease away, gone to their homes, gone to the confines of their home where they feel it was much safer. Then is when the older boys will start to talk about girlfriends and all that type of conversation.
Okay, so just for translation, to talk about Jumbie and Jack-o'-lantern and stuff like that, these are things that would make the young fellas get scared. Mm-hmm.
So they didn't want to hear about that. So they just eased away from the crowd and went to the confines of their house.
And that's an interesting comparison between then and now. Because Jumbie and Jack-o'-lantern can scare the daylight out of
young people
back then.
Mm-hmm.
And even walking close to a cemetery at night. Not so now, right?
Oh, you didn't want to pass a cemetery. As a matter of fact, when people died, you didn't want to pass their house at night, especially in the dark, because those days we didn't have electricity in Mount Lily.
Mm-hmm.
So the place was dark. So you want to make sure that if you were going to pass one of those people's houses, you would have been with company, not by yourself.
And to add to Jumbie and Jack-o'-lantern at ghosts.
And ghosts.
People used to be afraid of ghosts.
Yep. I remember at one point my parents went to England, and my brother and we used to sleep down at our house with two other friends. And I would wake up at nights and you have the rats or whatever on the galvanized crawling, and you know, it scared the life out of me being in bed and hearing those type of noises in the house, because I thought it was ghosts.
Did you ever see? Have you ever seen a ghost?
Never saw one, but you believe in them when you are young.
Do they still exist?
No.
They don't exist.
No.
There's a howling sound that is or used to be associated with ghosts, right?
Well, that's what people say. Yeah. Well, now you grow up and you think back, it might have just been the wind.
The wind. Well, indeed, I heard a story in the same area, in the Mount Lily area, of a fellow who was running one night from a ghost, and the more and the faster he ran, the closer the ghost seemed to be getting. And when he reached home finally out of breath, the ghost disappeared. And in the end, what happened was he had a bottle which was empty. And as he ran, you know, the bottle will make
the noise from the bottle
louder, and he thought it was a ghost. So ghosts and Jumbie and those jack-o'-lantern and stuff like that, those are things that scared the daylight out of you and when you were growing up.
When we were growing up.
Okay. So what other area would we like to highlight at this point of the book? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. The type of things that we did, like in Mount Lily at the time, there was no running water. So there's an area by the name of Spring, which is in the camps area. But you know, those days your mother wanted to do her washing and all that type of thing, and we had to wake up at mornings like 5 o'clock, because before we went to pasture to look after our animals, we had to go to camps, which is about 3/4 of a mile away, if not a mile.
And just for direction in terms of folks who might be listening and might be familiar with the area, camps is the area, and the spring is the area that one of the sources that we get our water from, the potable water right now, right?
Yeah, that's
and that's they also call it over a river. Sometimes some people
call it over river. Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the areas that we get the island's water supply from them.
Yeah,
okay. Yes.
The water springs from the hill.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
So we had to do 2 buckets of water before we go to our pasture to look after our animals. Then once we finished that, we had to go pasture in an area they call Bungrung, which is a few hills away from our home. Look after our animals. On our way back home, we would cut a couple bundles of wood, because we used to burn our own coal. So we had to cut a couple bundles of wood, maybe bring in a bunch of wood, and by the time we get home, if for any reason there was a little time between that time and going to school, we had to do some gardening. But at the time, there was also the headmaster who used to punish people for arriving in school late. So going to school, you know, you don't walk, you always run. And so it shows the amount of things that one did before they went to school, between wake-up time and before they went to school for 8:45 at mornings. Nowadays, the young kids, I wonder what they do now. They get up all type of hours, and I remember once I started going high school, we had the problem where Mr. Maynard, who owned the truck, would go to his land down in Round Hill, and when he come to pick us up to take us to school, he would not even come up Mount Lily. We had to walk from Mount Lily down to camp's main gate, and there is where we would catch him. He would go up to Brooklyn, pick up the people in Brooklyn and pick us up. Nowadays, the young people, the buses, school buses, are coming through the village, stopping at their gate, and they're not even ready. So there's such vast differences between yesteryear and today.
You spoke about one of the things that you used to do is fetch maybe sometimes a couple bundles of wood.
Yeah.
It's all in the book, but one of the things that I found was interesting, so that maybe you can give the listening audience a little idea. The thing was fascinating to me is the fact that you describe how you were able to build a coal pit.
Yes.
And you know how to be. So I'm thinking that that's one of the things we used to do, which we will have to redo again next year when we have the Herbert Beach Affair, is to demonstrate how a coal pit
is built.
And so I don't know, can you just without saying everything that's in the book, but can you just give a little idea of how a coal pit is built?
Well, you get your wood, and once you get your wood, you start to build it almost like a pyramid.
And this wood is green wood.
Is green wood. So you build it up, and once you finish, build it up to the size that you want based on the amount of wood and the amount of coal that you want. Then you have to take bush and grass and put over that wood. Once you put the bush and grass, enough bush and grass over it, you now have to use the dirt and cover the bush and grass. Now there is always what they call the mouth, where you leave the mouth open so that you could do the lighting of it. Once that lighting is done, you now have to cover that mouth area with grass and then your dirt. But you always leave some area at the bottom of the built up area so that ventilation could take place. But you will see the amount of smoke that's coming from that bottom area, and you have to put enough dirt to cover, to kind of stifle it, to prevent it from burning too fast. So it's a slow burn, and the slow burn takes place for about 2 to 3 days, but you will see the size of the pit going down, and you will also see the color of the smoke that's coming, where you will now know that the wood, the green wood, has now turned to coal.
So the color of the smoke changes.
The color of the smoke changes. So you will now put more dirt in the areas where the smoke was coming from. And basically what you're doing is stifling the fire on the inside. It's just like putting a glass over a burning candle. You cut off that fire. You might leave it for a day, and then the fire, well, it's not fully burnt out, but it lessens the fire on the inside. Then you now have to pull it. But there's an art of pulling it, where you pull it with the dirt, so that the dirt also puts out that fire that is remaining before you can now pick it up.
And the result of all that is called
Charcoal.
charcoal. And so that's what people use, and some people argue is the best to use when you're doing barbecue.
Barbecue.
Right. So it's, as I said, it's an intriguing process.
Yeah, but those days, Webbo, you also use the coal to do your cooking on, because we didn't have the gas that we have now. So it was either dry wood or coal, based on where you're going to have that fire. And you also did your ironing with coal.
There's a debate sometimes that go on between maybe persons who have experience cooking on coals and wood, and cooking on electric and gas stoves. I don't know if it will ever be an ending debate. It might be a never-ending debate. So here's a question: which food tastes better?
Wood and coal. Wood and coal.
So because people always talk about that. They say, well, and that is one of the things I think that persons who live abroad for a long time and had not experienced those things that they experienced when they were growing up, they would come back for culture. I'm hoping that they would get some kanki or something that's cooked on wood or coal and stuff like that.
Webbo, when I was growing up, I remember I had a friend from over in Fountain, and for whatever reason, I went by him one day where he was boiling his salmon, and stayed with him around while he boiled his salmon. And it's only after I got a little older, well, actually when I joined the police force, that I realized the danger. Because if the police had come and met me there with him boiling his salmon, I would have gone to the station with them. But I didn't think about those things. And persons, I remember when they opened up the village over at Fothergill, they actually, down in the corner, they had a still down there where they were making the hammer.
Oh, really? So they demonstrated how hammer was made?
Yes,
so exactly. You seem like a fellow with a lot of experience. You know how to do a coal pit, how to do that. You know or have seen them how to make hammer.
Really?
I,
as a matter of fact, I can still make it.
Oh, really?
And when I trained at the police training center in Canada, Regina, Saskatchewan, they actually showed us how rum was made. So that's another experience, but I knew that already.
Right. So for the persons who may not be aware, and this is quite a bit of our Navisian culture or way of life back then that we are talking about. So the hammer is what we call our local rum.
Local rum.
And it is still prohibited.
It's still prohibited.
Legally prohibited.
You know why it's prohibited is because, they used to use the still. That's the worm that goes to the barrel to cool down the moisture, so it turns to water. But it's not. It's not a safe type of material to use. It's poisonous, could be poisonous, and also the government does not get any revenue from it.
And that's another cultural debate also, because folks will tell you that hammer is medicinal. It cures a lot of...
They say you don't get the after effects in the morning when you wake up.
Oh, really?
That's what they say.
You don't get a hangover?
You don't get a hangover.
Really? They say it's good for a lot of things too. I don't know if it's a myth.
It's good for a lot of things. People rub their joints and all kind of different things they can be used for.
I was speaking with a fellow a few days ago, and he was making a particular comment. I hope this is not exposing anybody, because I wasn't his president. I hope that you think I can get locked up for saying that the fellow said what he will do if he get in 2 shots of Hammond? That wouldn't get me locked up or anything.
I don't think so.
But I was just saying how many different things people say that you can use this Hammond for, and it cures or whatever it is good for. And so you have the cooking on wood and coals and stuff like that, and the food tastes better. You have your local rum or whatever, and it has whatever. So it's very interesting.
I also spoke in the book about a guy from Mount Lily who used to be like a doctor to a certain extent. And the older guys, whenever they had these pains and so on, when they felt sick, they would go to him, and he would provide them with a bottle of bush that a kind of tea that he had boiled from certain bushes. He never left the remedy for anyone, so no one knows at this point what he used to boil up. But these men, they were farmers, so they couldn't go out like today to do their farming because they're sick. And they would go to him, and he would give them a bottle of this bush tea, and they would drink it. But once they drink it, it was ripping out the inside. But by morning, they were strong like lion.
Oh, really?
They were strong like lion and headed out. They knew that they would get that pain because of what the medicine was. But they knew that by next morning, they would be as strong as ever. No pain.
How much of it, though, was all in the brain? Because a fellow met me a couple of years ago, and on the side of the road was some bushes, and he said, "Webbo, you know what those are good for?" And I told him no, and he told me what it was good for, and he picked quite a bit and gave them to me, and he told me to use them. Well, I'm kind of skeptical fellow, so I passed on the message to some colleagues of mine. And before I could blink, they grabbed all and came back the next day and asked me if I have any more.
Yeah, but Webbo, the older people, when we grew up, they knew what the different type of bushes were for. Whether it was for cold, whether it was for pain, wherever, there was a purpose for the different type of bushes. So whenever young children were sick, many of them didn't take them to the doctor. They just got these bushes. Like I knew that if I got a fall, I didn't want to tell my parents, because the first thing they were going to do was to give me some aloes with an egg beat up in it. Because you know what happened? The aloes thinned the blood, so you didn't get blood clots. Those are things.
Right, and so when we read the book, not everything that you've said, but a number of these things you can find in the book. You also spoke about going to what was called Combermere School. So, and that's the area where the clinic is now.
Yes.
Right, and on the other side, they don't use that building anymore. That building used to belong to initially the Methodist Church. Because the truth was that most of the schools were started by churches.
Yes. The Anglican Church and the Methodist Church. Those were the two main churches that actually owned the schools.
And so you talked a little bit about going to school at Combermere.
Yes, and you know the book talks about the discipline and all those type of things. You know, nowadays you go to school, and at the end of the year, everybody moves to the next class. But those days, you had to be qualified to go to the next class. either you had to repeat that class. It doesn't happen nowadays. And it addresses a lot about the discipline that took place during my time at school at Combermere. You know, the punishments. I remember in Junior A and Junior B, where I did mention in the book, where I actually had to stand on the bench. You know, part of the punishment was stand on the bench. And if they caught you talking while you were still on the bench, you now had to put one of your feet in your hand. So you had to stand on the bench with one foot in your hand, and all those type of things, in addition to the beatings.
When you look back at those that were used for disciplinary measures, and obviously hardly any, not much if any, are used these days. You compare and contrast. You think if you were to bring back some of those, it would serve us better?
It would, to a certain extent, even though I find that corporal punishment is somewhat going overboard, because teachers used to misuse corporal punishment. There are times when it works. You know, you don't spare the rod and spoil the child, but there are times that it works, but a lot of teachers used to misuse it.
So, but they basically that is almost eradicated now.
Yes.
And then people argue that that's part of the reason why we have almost a whole society of indiscipline.
But there are different ways to discipline children without the corporal punishment aspect of it. And you know, nowadays there's so much ways you can discipline children, whether you take away the privileges from certain things, like from the computer or whatever. But there is still need for discipline. You can't eradicate it.
You also spoke a little, to some degree, about the political aspect of life on Nevis and growing up as well.
Yeah, you see, the book actually addresses a number of topics. And what I did was I took each chapter to address certain topics. And so when I started, like chapter 1, well, dealt with my early years on Nevis. Chapter 2, daily activities in the early years. Chapter 3, general discipline, schooling, and also my dreams. Then chapter 4 dealt with agriculture. Chapter 5 dealt with the medical services on Nevis at the time. Chapter 6 dealt with commerce on Nevis. Chapter 7, recreation on Nevis. Chapter 8, community activities on Nevis. Chapter 9, transportation on Nevis. Chapter 10, politics in Nevis. Chapter 11, holidays on Nevis, what holidays used to be like. Chapter 12, the legal system. Chapter 13, disasters on Nevis, and with the disaster, one of the main areas I dealt with was the Christina disaster. Chapter 14, we talk about the technology, the type of technology we had compared with today. Chapter 15 dealt with tourism, and in chapter 16 it gives a comparison of past and present.
Under commerce, there's a section that, again, to me, and I believe to the readers, they'll find very interesting or intriguing also, but there's something that used to be prevalent illegal and maybe still goes on to some degree. Not just in Nevis, but in a lot of the islands, smuggling.
Yes.
And you talked a little bit about that.
Yes. You know, our boats used to go over to St. Bart's. You know, the guys who used to do that go over to St. Bart's, and they would bring back the liquor, and even like things like butter and cigarettes and all those type of things. But they always came in the darkness of night.
And that's one of the reasons why we ended up with quite a few skilled boatmen.
Yep.
To you know, traverse those dark and sometimes rough waters at night, but the truth is that it was to some degree a way of life.
It was a way of life. And you know, Webbo, I think I spoke about a certain gentleman who used to be involved in it, and for whatever reason, he had some other guys who were his friends that were doing more of it than him. And so he actually gave these guys money to buy things for him, to bring back for him, because he wanted to know what time they were coming back, because he wanted to punish them for doing more business than him. And so he was able to get the time and actually told the police what time they were coming back, where they were coming, and so forth, so that the police can go and catch them. And it worked.
Right, and that's perhaps an illustration of why sometimes people would sarcastically say, "Welcome to Nevis," the University of Nevis, right?
That's right.
Right, and you would have heard stories that even some of the store owners, shop owners, in order to evade the high rate of taxation on alcohol, and you had mentioned the liquor, because that's one of the main things they brought.
Yep.
Because and if you were able to get that liquor in, and without paying that high tax, then you can make a decent profit.
A good profit. You know.
So so that is in there under commerce, and then also I think the different areas, and you mentioned making a coal pit, and how persons use that as a commercial enterprise.
Yep.
When you couldn't use all the coals at home, then you can make money from it.
Yeah, because I spoke about the lighters. The lighters are the big boats that used to ply between St. Kitts and Nevis, and that was part of their trading, like take our coals over to St. Kitts for sale. And my good buddy here, my brother, one time he needed to have a radio because he loved to listen cricket on his radio. So whenever we went to pasture, the games used to be on the radios. So he actually, between him and myself, we did a coal pit, and that was specifically for his radio. So we got enough money, he bought his radio, and I say we got enough money, and he bought the radio, but all of a sudden now it was his radio, not our radio. And so he didn't even allow me to use the radio.
Because he was bigger than you.
Because he was bigger than me.
and those are some of the yes, he also talk about the importance of church attendance in the community.
And you know, church was something that when it came to Sunday, all the children and the adults headed to church, and so the churches were filled each Sunday. We went to church. Well, to begin with, we got up at mornings and we had our morning devotion before we left the house to go pasture and such things. Then we had to come back, we had our breakfast, then we headed to Combermere Church. After church, it was Sunday school. and we stayed at church and attended Sunday school in church. Then we came home and we still had to go to Sunday school in the village. But even after Sunday school, we still had to go to night service. So our day on a Sunday might not be finished until 8 o'clock. Well, 8 o'clock was, real late those days. So our activities for a Sunday might not be finished until 8 o'clock. But it was all devoted towards church.
And you showed how, again, the importance of church in a society, where and you gave some illustrations where where you would hear the phrase that a village rears a child.
Yep. And so if a child did something, or even older child, let's say grown-ups, the minister was the one that settled the matter. The minister was the mediator, not like everything happens now you run to the police. Before you reach the police, you went to the minister, who would discuss it with both parties and settle the matter.
Because obviously, because of the importance of the church in the society,
yep.
And then the head of the church obviously had that respect in the community.
That's right.
And thus you go to the minister and what he says in terms of his mediation,
yep.
Worked and got a harmonious society.
The only thing, I don't know if it's positive or negative, it was like it was that all these ministers, pastors, they were white people, and you know how our people in those days respected the white man. So whatever he said was like, gospel.
So you think that after the color change and after the society progressed, you think that the respect dropped a bit?
Yeah, I think it lessened. It lessened a bit, or I should say a lot.
That's an interesting observation in terms of comparing the society now to then. And the ministers would have been white because of the remnants of the slavery.
Yep.
In terms of the plantations and who were the head of anything.
And Webbo, I wrote in the book, and the person who edited my book, I spoke about something, and the person that edited the book is from Vancouver, Canada, and the person, I assume, is a white person, and she said, it was so sad that something that I mentioned in the book was allowed to happen. And what it was in the days when I grew up, you go to a bank, you go to government offices or many establishments, and it was always the white person who was in charge. If there were promotions, the promotions were given to people with the lighter skin. And all those things that were happening in the time that I grew up, between the 50s and the 70s. Luckily, it's not happening today. But those are the things that we went through.
Luckily, it's not happening today. You can have a debate on that. Interestingly enough, I was speaking with a few members of staff today, and I pointed out to them that I came across something on the internet, which I was looking at, and it spoke about the history of racism in Jamaica. And I looked at it, and it was very fascinating. You can easily replace Jamaica with Nevis or St. Kitts or Barbados, because it reflected in part what you just said in reference to the persons in
the higher
positions and so on and so forth. And what you're going to find, it was implying as well, that remnants of that still remain, not necessarily in essence of white, but it was pointing out these sort of prejudices are systemic. And so the head of a particular institution might be me. But if I have the philosophical thinking of the person who occupied that position 80 years ago, I can treat you the same way.
Mm-hmm. Well, but do you realize that in the days when I grew up, when the girls played Dolly House, and I guess most people know what Dolly House is.
Well, not everybody, but
the person who was the fairer skin would be allowed to be the doctor or the nurse.
Right.
In those days.
But does it? Do you know that in these days you still have fellows who will hang out just like they used to hang out, you point out, on the rocks there below, in the village below you. By the way, that's not the area they call Jubigot?
Jubigot, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So every village had a Jubigot. In Craddock Road, we had a place called Big Rock.
Big Rock.
Right, that we used to do the same thing, hang out there at nights and talk and stuff like that. Right? So do you know that it still exists where if a number of girls are approaching, some fellas will pick out those are the one that has fairer skin?
Yep.
Okay, so you would agree that to some degree it still exists.
And in the book, I actually says many of our people, our minds are still warped.
Well, that in itself is a debate, and that is why I'm always genuine with my comments and evaluation. That is why I find your book so revealing, intriguing, and indeed a lot of fun too, especially the part with when your brother Orville bowled that ball. You didn't find out until you reached here tonight. But, but I really think that was a good one, a good light moment. So, and that is what makes it so intriguing to read, and then to make the connect, and to see how much we have moved away to some of the things that you highlighted, and how much of it still remain.
Yes. And you see, when I wrote the book, I wanted to kind of write about my personal experiences. So even though it might be more like autobiography on myself, it also carries the historical aspects as to what took place during that period.
In fact, I was mentioning to someone today that we're going to be doing you tonight with this book, and I was sharing with them some of the stuff that I read, and being from my family, of course, myself from that area as well, Mount Lily, we were just a little lower down than you.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned the Herbert Beach, why you knew it was called that,
yes,
by that name. And I found it interesting and true. And I said, the persons of today who like to speak about Herbert Beach and don't know nothing about it should read the book.
But yeah, because Herbert Beach, where it is today, that was not Herbert Beach.
Right, the entrance
Yeah.
where we used to
Camp Gate,
right,
Camp Gate. That's where
the gas station
yeah,
is.
by the gas station. That's where you went down, and that's where Herbert Beach was. And the reason why it carries the name Herbert Beach is because Sammy Herbert, which is your grandfather, used to work his land there.
Right.
So he
and
had
do the fishing
and do his fishing.
on the Clatter.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and he used to have some donkeys to pull up the boat, you know, trying to row. And why, you know, I'm glad that you wrote that and explained it just now, is so those people who are speaking about Herbert Beach, the few people with such passion, thinking that I had something to do with it. You know what I'm saying? So they should read the book.
Yeah, but between where Herbert Beach was and where it is today, there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Burton, a white man,
right,
who owned a cane field. He had a cane field right between there, between where Herbert Beach used to be and where it is today. It was a cane field that was there by Mr. Burton.
And then you spoke about Miss Pomeroy moving further down to Nisbet, and there is a story about that as well.
Yeah.
You know, and so all these, ladies and gentlemen, are in the book. So you know the name of the book. We can. I'm going to get a break, but I have a copy. Thank you very much. Compliments. And as I said, I'm almost through with it. It's a very good read. But where can folks?
You know, right now, as I say, I just got the books from. They actually came out of England. I just got them last week, so I haven't got them in many stores as yet. But presently, there is a store, a bookstore at the Cotton Ginnery Mall. The name of that store is Pen and Paper Bookstore. They have copies there. The Pen and Paper Bookstore at the Cotton Ginnery Mall. A number of other persons have asked me to be able to carry the book in their stores, but I haven't got them around as yet.
Okay.
But presently, I also have a number of copies, so persons can get copies from me.
Okay. Perchance somebody who grew up with you is listening, maybe in Canada, the Virgin Islands, some other island, maybe even St. Kitts. Can you remember any one of your friends who grew up with you and you would like to just give them a shout out? Anybody who you remember went to school? Well, let's do that.
The Jefferses, you know, Hugh Jeffers, Martin Jeffers, Hilton Jeffers. You have their family like Maureen, or the Jeffers, Maureen, Cecile, and David Daniel, and all those. But they can also get copies of the book by going on Amazon. And there are other companies, online companies that carry the book. But Amazon.com is one of the major ones.
Everybody takes credit for it as they should. But in your village, Mount Lily was known for a popular local drink.
Oh, yes. Sarsaparilla.
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 Okay.
And there were so many people in Mount Lily that made sarsaparilla, and I did mention the name of a number of them. And if you were to come down over in Fountain, they also made it. But if I were just to touch on Mount Lily, you had David France, right up at the top of Mount Lily. You had my grandfather, George Clark. He made it also. And they made it for sale, so it was almost like a part of commerce. So you had my grandfather, David France, Benjanil, Olga France.
You had the Jeffers.
You have Ernest Jeffers. And
the Jeffers who you used to call not a scraps.
Not a scrap.
Right.
Ernest Jeffers.
Right. Okay.
And, you know, my father, and
Yes.
after he died, my mother continued with my nephew Oral. Yeah. So they continued.
Right. So and the thing about the sarsaparilla, there is something that I don't know if it's a myth, but
my brother is laughing on that one.
Arvil, you want to tell us about it? You know anything about it, sarsaparilla? You know anything about sarsaparilla? You could tell us?
They say what it make you does.
Well, what it does?
Huh?
What?
Good. It was a good medicine for, you know.
You know what you know. Your sexual drive.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so my father used to make it, and my father would come to town. He would fill the back of his car, and he would park right by Main Street Grocery. And in about an hour's time, all that drink that he brought in would be gone. And it bought by men. So they used to say women shouldn't drink it. I don't know why women shouldn't drink it.
Really?
Because to me, it was a nice, refreshing drink. But for what they said it did, they didn't want the women to drink it.
Oh, really?
So it was drunk by men.
And it's not a myth. Well, you wouldn't know. That's why I'm asking. Arvil is not a myth. I mean, it is true.
I believe it was all in the mind.
Oh, okay. just checking. but that is one of the things also that's cultural to Nevis.
Yes.
Because people would come still, and if you want to give them a piece of Nevis, and you'll take some sarsaparilla.
You know, Webbo, when Leat used to fly between Nevis and Antigua, the people in Antigua used to send down their bottles to get cases of sarsaparilla sent up to them.
Yeah, the Cavalier bottles.
Yeah.
Yes.
So somebody at the airport would come and bring the bottles. My father will fill it, take it back down to the airport, and off it goes to Antigua. But the thing about it, Webbo, is that sarsaparilla, you can, once you throw it off after about 4 days brewing, and you throw it off, you cannot close the bottles too tight, especially glass bottles.
Yeah, that is true.
Because you close it too tight, and when you go out in the morning, in the room where you left, they all burst. All the bottles just burst because of the whatever built up in them. So maybe it's not a myth.
Believe you me, that's going to be a debate going forward. I know everybody's going to. By the way, if you would like to join in on the conversation, you can call in 469-1616 or 1700, because everybody, when it comes to our history, as we are talking now in your book, everybody likes to weigh in. And I got to mention here an illustration of that, because a few weeks ago we were talking about fruits and the different type of fruits, etc., etc. And that's another thing I have to thank you for. Before we started the program, you presented me with a gift, some fruits, right, that you brought, and one of the fruits that you brought was one of the rare ones that we used to have but is not so plentiful.
The governor plum.
The governor plum. I don't know how many people are going to know anything else they know it by. That's the purplish.
Yeah, the purplish plum. They have different names, Webbo, but I've heard some different names, but I can't remember because all I knew it by was governor plum, so that sticks in my mind.
Yeah, and it has a lot of seeds in it.
No, it has maybe 2 seeds. You'll find it.
Oh, really?
Two very small seeds, and you can even crack those seeds and eat them. You don't have to take them out.
Oh, okay.
So it's that plum that most people would soften up between their palms and
Oh, okay. Now I got you. Once you say soften it up, because when you told me about it, I was thinking on another plum. And do you know, when we were speaking about the maca and the other stuff and so on, people were so elated and excited about it. People are still asking me if I have any more maca. Just for old time's sake, they like to get one to eat and stuff like that. So I know people are going to be talking about it, the same sarsaparilla, because of what you said. It can do. Those who didn't know it will want to go and that's something else.
I used to make it, but it was too much work for me, and so I kind of gave it up. Because I used to have to get the sticks from up in Rollin Mountain. The guys used to get the sarsaparilla sticks from me there. Then I used to have to go out in the garden to and up in the hills to get the cacanda root.
Oh, okay. But you see, but that's good education, because I thought the only stick, so to speak, was the cacanga root.
No, there's the sarsaparilla sticks.
Oh, really? So you have the cacanga root and the sarsaparilla stick.
Then the ginger and the silament bush. Silament bush, and you basically, with the sugar, sweeten it. You put it there, and it stays there for about 4 days. Then you throw it off. And
I suppose just like alcohol, just like rum, sometimes it can be more potent. Some can be more potent than others.
It's just like the Hammond. The first part that you throw off is more potent, because you normally do a second batch with the same elements, but it's just that the first part that you throw off would be more potent than the second portion. So a lot of time people would mix it.
Well, because I know even with the sarsaparilla, one of the things that I know people will say, if maybe sometimes in a joking way or something, they will, if the other fellow see you drinking sarsaparilla, they will say you're looking help.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay, so those are some of the local drinks, for instance, that were made, when you were growing up.
Yes.
And then talk about some of the medication that we use locally, to get, and these are things that you had to do, because the island wasn't at that level of development where you can get in all that you're getting now to get by or survive, right?
And so we use a lot of bush tea. And in those days we didn't use a lot of carnation milk, because we had the cattle. Most people had cattle.
Okay, Nolan, let me just take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webber. Good evening, Mr. Nolan.
Good evening, Miss Henry.
This is Mrs. Henry. Sylvine.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I really appreciate the work that he has done, because it brought back a lot of memories. Well, I'm from St. Kitts, born and raised in St. Kitts. But some of the same things went on. I grew up in the village, up there with like Hammond City. But why does it smell so strong and so bad? Can you answer?
Why it smells so strong and so bad?
You can't hide Hammond,
The areas where you boil it would really smell, because they use they used to use the derivative from the sugar? Molasses. They used to use the molasses, and also, it's there for a few days, fermenting. So once they let it off, they throw off that.
You could tell when Hammond was around.
Yeah, well, it smells. It has that smell to that Hammond smell, but it. And Mrs. Henry, do you know why it's called Hammond?
Yeah, I think it is actually Hammond report. Is actually.
Yeah, exactly. When they had that report from the sugar industry, and the men went out and got drunk from the rum that they boiled. So it was actually called Hammond report, but they dropped the report and just called it Hammond.
Yeah, but I do appreciate it, because I love history. I love culture, and, things have changed. Some, as you said, for the better, some for the worse. But at least you can measure some sort of progress. Because we have come a long, long way. Long, long way. But the young people now, they have never experienced a lot of it, eh?
Yeah.
So to them, it's like fairy tales, they might think you make it up.
Right. And
They mightn't believe you, serious.
you know of sarsaparilla, caller?
No, say it don't make sarsaparilla.
Oh, but you heard of it.
For all the men who have, what do you call it now?
You see.
What they say, when you have the beaches, you have what?
Well, I really.
Well, Mr. Nola must know.
I'm,
Not that he suffers from it, but, they say, I'm trying to remember the word, but your penis don't stand up.
oh, okay.
Long enough.
Okay, well, I don't
That
know.
is why you see it's the men that they rush here for it,
Uh-huh.
Because to me it tastes like vinegar.
No, it's based on who make it. Some people make it and it could taste like vinegar.
Vinegar to me.
But other people who make it, you don't have that taste at all. A nice, pleasant drink.
So when the division bring down the sarsaparilla, even some of the young ones, I wonder say what happened to them and their neighbor. But I don't know exactly where motive is, because I used to go and stay in Back Village.
Yeah. I think the word they were looking for, Miss Henry, is impotent.
Yes, but you almost advertise it like that. No, serious,
Yeah, if you do.
It's a cultural thing. You will be surprised you could export it as that.
No, it is sold a lot. It is sold a lot. It is replaced by, maybe modern stuff now, but
The mother stuff doesn't lead to heart attack.
No, it's still sold a lot because many times I still get the inquiries. People from St. Martin still want to send up and
down the Virgin Islands, people go down there.
they still send up and ask me about it.
That thing that we did, I had a godfather who used to do bush tea. The same big rum bottles every weekend. You see him, and he used to take orders, He used to take orders. I want one for the cold and one for the this and one for the children. He said, make good money, but obviously he did not drink them because he ended up in the TB ward.
I see.
So I suppose he couldn't afford to drink any.
Yeah.
But it is so good. And I would encourage other people to write up their experiences for our young people. Because if nothing is said and nothing is written, then they get the impression that everybody bomb with a fridge in their house, and the thing that they take for granted. Everybody got a cell phone, a smartphone that you show them an old-time phone that you can work, what I mean? So it is so good, and I want to compliment you. And Webbo, you must write your one too,
Yeah, I'm doing one, and
I have written a book about the village, the settlement, the culture, the economic status, the social status, you know what I mean? Sports. Quite over 400 pages, but what happened, I lost my vision and all of that stuff. But I have it still. I'm trying to decide, should I give it to the thing, or should I have it printed? But it's good information.
Yeah.
So, and as you talk about Nevis, I remember we used to have like a joke in St. Kitts that Nevis only got one light.
Remember, I went to St. Kitts in 1965, and when I went down by the pier and looked over, you see a couple of flickering lights over in Nevis. It's no longer that way.
No. I went to Nevis when you had to go down and look water and bathe in the hot springs. I almost got heart attacks where my aunt took me. I think I was about 12 in Back Village where no water and whatnot. And we go down there, my aunt began heavy and so we go down, the one way come down on the side by the road.
Yes.
Yep.
And the men went inside to the women. So she said we gotta go bathe. I think in St. Kitts we go in the public bath. And so she started to take off her clothes. So she said, Sylvie, take off your one. So I asked her, those are our relatives and I said, am I taking out mine? I never take out my clothes but the strangers before.
Well, a few people still do it.
I was in shock when she told me that they're not related to each other. I said, you're going in India with these people, you know? Boy, I tell you, I got a lot of culture shock when I read news.
You know, Miss Henry, I spoke about the fact that when we used to go to the beach, young girls, you know, even up to a certain age, you get into 10 and 12 and so forth, and the girls used to bathe naked, and it was so innocent.
Yeah, nobody thought about it.
Nobody thought about it, but now, you know, the very little 3-year-old, you see them with their tops and everything on.
Yeah, you see, but you see that's an interesting point you make. So why is all the fuss now when the persons are parading for Culturama and Carnival with almost nothing?
No, but still though, the nakedness are tolerated at the back.
Yeah, but Mr. Walk with me. Mr. Nolan just said that they used to go to the beach,
Yeah.
and girls up to even a good age, everybody will, you know, they will bathe naked, and there was no great alarm. You agree with that? He said that, right? So my question is, why then is such a great alarm when the ladies are now going into the parades in Carnival and Culturama almost naked?
Miss Henry, I'll give you an answer for that. There's a place for everything.
Not only that, times have changed too. And that is, you see, look at the culture. It is now, what they're doing on the street is now considered to be sexual.
Oh, okay.
Right? One time it was cultural. All of us go down the bay. And well, in saying, at least the girls are in the pantry. Right? In a panty and maybe a t-shirt.
Okay, and so you're saying that the connotation you got from that was innocence back then.
Yes.
And now is sexual.
But now, you see, added to that, they just have these virtual sexual acts.
Okay. I got you. I just wanted to know the difference.
If you see them, might have virtual sexual acts, which in those days, those things were confined to the bedroom and in secrecy.
Okay.
You ever think about that?
Yeah, I got you. My role is just to, you know, get the different views. Yeah.
All right then.
Okay, very well.
Okay, thanks for calling, Miss Henry.
The other thing that when you were talking about the one light and so on, right? The other thing that, you know, people can read a book and they will find that's interesting, you pointed out the lanterns and the lamps that we used to use for lighting.
And you know, Webbo, it amazes me at this time that if our electricity goes out and you light one of these lanterns or one of those lamps that we used to use, like the place is so dark still. But when I was going high school, when I was younger growing up, that's what we studied from. You know, a hurricane lamp, you light it, and that's what you were reading from. You can't do it anymore now.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Herbert and Mr. Nolan.
Good evening.
I know Mr. Nolan by working at Four Seasons, but that is not what I called. So I called to ask him, how many ways does he know how to pack a coating?
Oh, there are different ways. There are people who just pack the wood and like they actually build almost like a metal thing around and put the wood in it and use the coal pit from that. But the main ones when we were growing up, especially out in our area, we didn't have the means of getting these metal things, and so the only way we were doing was building it almost like in a cone shape type thing and put the grass and so forth, the grass and bush on it and, you know, the dirt. So that was the main area.
The reason why I called, I'm from Britain, and my husband and me, my husband and his sister, and we used to burn coal together. And when they had started, I know they had two long pole, two long pieces of wood. And at the entrance of the wood is two stones, so in front is high and behind is low. And they will pack on those wood. But as you said, they leave a mouth. But now, I'm a coal burner. Up to this afternoon, I went by a coal pit to cool it up. And my son used a chainsaw and cut the wood. And we pack the wood, we start to pack the wood, make the bedding, and then we bring it up like an umbrella. But we leave the opening to pack in the top. And then when we finish pack the top, we will get the steel, bar it around, and put on the bush, the eucalyptus bush, dirt it, and then cut some pieces of wood to put in the head of it. And then we put on galvanized to keep it from explode. And then we will light it in the head, and then it will burn and burn and burn, and then we get good quality coal.
Yeah,
That's why I asked. Huh?
you have advanced now.
I got what?
You have advanced. You gone to the technological aspect of it.
Uh-huh.
You're more advanced than when we used to do it.
Used to do it, yes. We call them standing paper, and we light them in the head. We have big pieces of wood that after we throw in the fire, we pack in these wood, we put on the galvanized, we put on the bush, and then we put on the dirt, and then we will start when it will burn and burn and burn. Right now, I have a preparing pull it up yesterday, and I'm going to pull it on Saturday.
How long it takes?
Well, this one, it had three different kind of wood. It had gillets, it had yellow pickles, and it had finishers. So we light it Saturday morning, and it finished burning yesterday morning. I cool it up this afternoon to pull it Saturday coming.
Oh.
I always get them sell. People come from all over to buy them.
You use I don't know. You said you use different types of wood, but I know one of the best wood they used to use those days was the crusher.
The crusher. We never use that too. Once my son come in the area with them, we cut them and we will burn them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks much.
And Mr. Norton, good night. You know me, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Nolan. One of the things you remember Prende?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that we did at Herbert Beach for a couple of years when Prende was around, and he would demonstrate a coal pit, and a lot of folks used to bring the kids to see how a coal pit is, put together and stuff like that. So it's a fascinating thing to get that. Okay, let me get a quick break. 469-1616-1700 if you like to call and speak to Mr. Nolan about the book or something, the cultural aspect. We're back after these. Let me just get this quick before I go for the break. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, I always thought they dug the hole to make the culprit. I hear people saying that make culprit on top. From what I know, I've never really seen them, but I know they used to do a lot in the mountains and Casa Bush. So they don't dig the hole and then put the wood in the hole.
No.
I could have swear that. Thank you for enlightening me. All right then.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts or call them at 466-4938.
Always satisfying. Vaughn Radio, the powerhouse.
Back on this episode of Talk That Get Results with Lionel Nolan. The book is Growing Up in Nevis, and especially in the St. James area and the Mount Lily village from where he hails. Our numbers are 469-1616 or 1700. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, sir. This is Vanessa Xavier. I'm from the area of Fountain and Mount Lily. I would like to say congratulations to Mr. Nolan on writing this book. It seems to be very interesting. I personally is going to get one of those books and let my children read it, because growing up like that, sometimes you tell these youngsters about what used to happen in our days, and they would say to me, "Mommy, you're joking. Mommy, these things couldn't be happening in our days. You all had to like cold it and stuff like that. You all had to bring water." And one of the things I must say is that all of us had a pig or a goat, so that we would feed that pig, a domestic animal. So in the Christmas, when it comes to Christmas, our parents would sell it for us and give us a little pocket change to go to town on Christmas Eve. Now you can't even give the young people them and the dog, they don't hungry, because things have moved on. But I'm very happy that Mr. Nolan thought of it to write such a book, because I find it very interesting.
Yeah, Vanessa, one of the reasons why I really wanted to write this book is to show our younger people what history was like, what we had to do when we were growing up. Then some time ago, like during the COVID, I was up in Canada, and I was talking to two of my grandchildren, and I mentioned to them about the typewriter. And you know, they asked me, what is a typewriter?
Exactly.
So, you know, a lot of things, they don't know about what we used to do, how we used to do things. I remember, like, if we needed extra copies, what we had to do with the copies. The secretaries, when a secretary typed up something for you and they made a mistake, they had to type over the entire thing. And now, you know, they don't have to do those type of things. So I wanted to let the younger people know the type of things we went through, and the type of like, let's say, artifacts and so on that existed at the time.
Exactly. And we used to have to go to the neighbor's house to watch TV. We had one radio station, and it was Antigua. And if things went off in Antigua, that was it for us.
Yeah, so it is so important that our young people see what life was like in those days, and they read about it. So it's so important to have history recorded.
That is true, Mr. Mayor. And I must say congratulations to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert and your guest.
Thanks. Good evening.
Mr. Nolan,
Hi.
I am from Gingerland, and I know that when you do a coal kiln, right, you have to dig a pit. You dig it out, you use your fork and you clear it with your hoe, and then you pack your wood with cut to suit you. We mostly use pusher wood, sometimes gilly and whatever other strong wood, and you do some stakes with some green sticks. around to help with the packing. You remember that?
No, I wouldn't disagree with you because different people use different ways. So, there is no wrong way.
Yeah, but I was just saying that it sounded a bit strange to me. It would be interesting to know how you used to do it over by your area.
Yeah.
And then when the wood have been packed and all that, you put grass on top. Under where we call the fire hole, you have to put dry brush, that when you light it off, you have dirt on the top of it. Dirt over it completely. And you light it off and you make sure it's packed tight.
Yep.
If you notice that there's a little hole like fire coming through, bursting or anything, you have to quickly go and get wet dirt and you pack it back again to make sure
to stifle to stifle it a little.
Yes, that all the wood that you have come to coal one time. I think it's the second day or so.
Maybe
depends
the third
on how
day.
strong you do it. You go and you clear the coal and you have water and so by you, that if anything you can throw water on your coal or whatever.
No,
that
there was
burn in the bag.
There was an art of when you're pulling it and you see fire, you pull some dirt on it.
Yes, and they don't have water as well there because you know sometimes people burn that coal and all seem to be well, and one little piece with a spark in it, the bag of coal gone.
Well, what I mentioned too, it was the area when people take those bags of coal and put them in a room, and there would be one little piece of fire in one of these coals, and many people had their rooms burnt down.
Burn right down.
Yeah, burn right down.
Burn right down. But Mr. Lorna, I was listening. I got away from the radio for a while, but you didn't say the price of the book, did you?
The books retail at $50.
Okay.
But right now I have a complimentary offer of $40 if you were to get it from me. But it's retail at $50.
Well, you want to save one for me, please?
Oh yes, I can.
And you know who it is, right?
No.
Jennifer Freeman.
Oh, it's Jennifer. Okay.
And you could give my friend the at Ocean View.
Yeah, Pearline.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll deal with her.
Okay.
To deal with you through her.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Yes, I told you that we're going to have some interesting discussion on this book, and I know my audience, I know my folks, based on what they're going to like this book. And you're going to maybe get some orders too, more orders for this sarsaparilla thing, because I know what they like too. Yeah, you also mentioned about disasters in Nevis, and you spoke about how the Christina disaster, which is a huge in terms of not just Nevis, the Caribbean, and how as a consequence of that the politics exploded.
Webbo, I remember I was on the police force and I had taken leave and came over to Nevis to spend some time with my family. And it so happened that I had gone to the mountain on the Saturday with my grandfather up in Greengut. And coming from the mountain, Greengut is kind of down in a little valley, but coming from down in the valley, I saw the Christina when the Christina reached Nag's Head. But I had to walk through the bush now, and when I was walking the bush, I would have lost sight. And I had to go to town to pick up 2 sisters. Actually, it was going to be 3 sisters coming from St. Kitts. And as I got home and got into my father's car and start driving, Westbury Road was very, very bad that time, so it was better to drive around Newcastle. And when I reached Jones Bay, I saw people gathered there, so I stopped wondering what was going on. And they told me Christina sank. And that was a shock because I'm supposed to have 3 sisters on Christina. So they were bringing in dead bodies and so at the time. but I didn't see any of my sisters, so I went to town because they said there were boats that were actually bringing people to Charlestown. So I went there, went across on the pier, looked, didn't see anybody, went up to the hospital, didn't see any of my sisters, and so I went back home. Then my sister Carmen, my dad and I went back to town, and it turns out that we didn't see any of our sisters that evening, so we went back home, and later in the evening we got a call from one of the sisters to say that she didn't make it because she had to stay over in St. Kitts because her dress that she wanted to wear on the Sunday to go to church wasn't finished yet, so she was going to come over on the plane on the Sunday. So that in itself was a positive, because there was I thinking 3 sisters had gone, but at least one sister had called to say she didn't make it. So
meaning what? You had sisters on the Christina?
2 sisters that
really?
on Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 18 and 19. One worked for the Bank of America and one worked for, was a nurse in training over on St. Kitts.
And that in itself is a good chunk of Nevis's history. And what were your sisters doing in St. Kitts? And what people would need to understand is what a large percentage of Nevisians used to go to St. Kitts to work for a certain standard of work, if you nursing and police and bank stuff like that.
Well, it was like a little brain drain also, because all the top civil servants in Nevis, once you reach a certain level, they were taken over to St. Kitts. And so we lost a number of persons in that category. Parks Walwyn, Sweeney, Samuel Sweeney, and a number of other top civil servants. Even a person from my class in high school, he had gone over to St. Kitts and died, and it was sad. It was sad. And one of the things I did mention too, it was the fact that because of the amount of farmers, what's those people that used to go over to St. Kitts to sell their products.
We used to call them turn hand.
Turn hand. Yeah, a lot of those died on Christina, and as a result of it, it lessened farming in Nevis. It decreased farming in Nevis because those were the people that used to work the lands on Nevis.
And the trauma, in fact, over the Culture weekend, I was speaking with a friend of mine. We were speaking about that same event, and he said to me that one of his friends who live in the United States, only up to a few years ago, got some relief from the shock and the trauma from the sinking of the thing, the Christina, because we didn't know anything about that in those days. The trauma and the type of effects it had on persons who might not have been on the boat, but the young kids who were left with motherless and fatherless, etc., etc.
Yep. No, it was something that really hit my entire family, because not only my brother or my 2 sisters, but I had a girlfriend who also died on Christina, and then a number of cousins,
and at that, what was your feeling like over a period of time? How did it affect you in terms of the shock?
Well, it seems like I was a strong person, because my mother and father, who lost 2 children, I never saw a tear shed from them. They absorbed it, and it was something that you wouldn't think that a person that lost 2 children of that age would go through without even shedding a tear.
Okay, I'm going to let you continue, but let's take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. I remember the Christina disaster very vividly. We were at what they used to call Mosquito Bay, which now is Owali. I remember we were there bathing, and we saw when the Christina reached by the Nag set right on the area there. And we continued bathing and so on. Then after a while, after a while we after a while we missed the Christina. And when we left the beach coming to town, oh man, it was a session. The vehicles were traveling, man, like a jet plane. When we by a cotton ground, what they call Python or something there. It was a pastor. He was from Jamaica, and I could remember in his Jamaican tone. But I forgot what happened. And so when we got to Jessup, we went up through Jessup, and folks were running down. And so he stopped and asked, and he asked, what happened? And they said the Christina sank. And after we came back, we came into town, and folks were on the pier. Oh man, they were bringing in the dead bodies. And we went to the hospital, and there was a number of dead persons. I think there was a boat they call Effort. That too was assisting. But in all of that, I had a sister who went down. She left 6 children in Cotton Rock with a lady. She was coming home to attend to them. And for some reason, one of the worker on the boat, I think he had a child by her as well. And, I heard the story yesterday. He said when he tried to go to her, the surf, she just went under. And had a cousin as well from Brown Hill, went down. And those 6 children, I remember they had a little crutch here in Charlestown, right where Solomon business is right now. And I used to go down there and attend to them. They had the lady they call Miss Bopier, and they used to be the ones who look after the children in the night. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really something. And I could remember my sister name was Leontine Daniel. She when you look at the name that you have there, it will say Leontine Daniel. And she was my sister, and the cousin was from Brown Hill. Yeah, I think her name was Yvette Powell.
Yeah. Okay.
Something like that, But that was something. I remember that well.
All right. Okay, caller.
Yes.
All right. Thanks much for that input. We're running out of time, Linnell, but you also in the book spoke about a little politics, how, political parties were formed and so on.
Yeah, those days, you had not much of politics, partisan politics. You got, I remember you had Gordon from Gingerland, Wilmot Nickers from Combermere, Eugene Wallowin from Charlestown area. But it was like those people, they didn't have much of a say when it came to national politics, federal politics. So we didn't get much in Nevis. We did not get much in Nevis because whatever was supposed to be given to Nevis was kept in St. Kitts. And those were the days like when if St. Kitts got a new fire truck, a new vehicle, they sent the old one over to Nevis. We never get anything new. But the representatives for Nevis didn't have much of a say. And even to the point of, at a certain time, you had Mr. Bradley, George Bradley, who was sent over to Nevis as the government secretary. So whatever whatever he reported to Mr. Bradshaw, I don't know. But those days I was very good with Mr. Bradshaw, and whenever he came over to Nevis, I would have to be driving him around and so on. And even to the point of one day we wanted to go up to Fountain Mount Lily, and when we turned off of Cades Bay, you couldn't drive on the road because it was so bad, so we had to drive through the cane field. He used to have a Jeep. We had to drive through the cane field in order to get up that area. But Nevis was totally ignored by the federal government. And I speak more on it, so people can read and
in the
see
book.
those things.
You see, that would be an interesting area to look at, because the younger folks would not understand the history, and it probably will show the difference, the disparity between the older folks and the way they will relate to St. Kitts, as opposed to, because of those experiences that you just referred to just now, as opposed to the younger folks who perhaps don't know anything about those stuff.
It's only since 1967, during the rebellion in Anguilla, that Kittitians stopped saying that Nevisians and Anguillans are foolish. They started to say that we were the smart ones. It's only since 1967 that occurred. But before that, they used to call us Baba Johnny and all those type of things. Yeah.
So they used to actually think we were foolish?
They would think that we were foolish.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way it was in those days. They used to ridicule us.
Oh, really? It's amazing how much I learn over these years just having conversations. So they actually used to think that we're foolish.
Yeah, and you say, oh, another Nevis man.
Okay, 469-1616-1700 if you'd like to make a comment. Congratulate Mr. Nolan in the book if you like what you heard. And quickly again, Mr. Nolan, how can they get a copy?
Persons can get a copy from me. There is a store down at the Cotton Ginnery Mall, pen and paper bookstore. They can get copies from there. And persons, especially overseas, can go on Amazon.com and get their copy. It's also published through Barnes and Noble, Abe Books, Walmart Books, eBooks, Apple Books, and so they can also get it online. So, it's available out there.
The book, Linnell Nolan, Growing Up in Nevis. Any final things that you like to point out, and any final things well, we got somebody who in the waning minutes. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening. Just one last thing. Well, I know Kathy, sorry, let me turn on the radio. Has Mr. Nolan ever thought of getting the thing done audible?
Yes, it's possible. You can also order it through that means from any of those Barnes and Noble.
The audio has already been done?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll try and see what I can do.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Right, thank you.
Yes.
Let's see. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Let's see. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes. Could you? Good evening. Thank you for holding. Callers, when you call, please turn your radio down. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yes. Let me tell Mr. Nolan.
Good evening. You're on the air. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening.
You're on the air. Could you go ahead?
Yes. Someone else is speaking.
No, because you have your radio on.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes.
I would like to say good evening, Mr. Webbo, and good evening to Mr. Linnell and Orville Noah, and I'm calling from Bellevue, Florida, and I want to congratulate Miss. Thank you.
You
I'm
have
calling from Bellevue,
you
Florida.
caller, work with me. Turn your radio or your
Yes.
computer off or down. Listen to the phone.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm sorry. Yes. I'm calling to wish Mr. Nolan congratulations for his book. I'm calling from Bellevue, Florida. I'm Omel Nolan. I'm proud of it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Webbo, good evening. Good evening, Mr. Nolan.
Good evening.
Congratulations for writing the book.
Thank you.
But let me ask you a question. Did they tell you when you were among the people with the hammer as a boy that it was illegal and therefore you could get yourself in trouble?
No, I didn't know that. I was a small boy still, maybe just about 15 or so, and didn't think about it. As we grow up, there's so many things that we see now that we see the danger in it, but we didn't see the danger in those days.
Well, I had the experience of being around those people at the time, and I knew it was illegal. The second thing was the culprit. The grass just got to be moved from the dirt, and therefore you just put 2 sticks and pack it like a rectangle or a dome. So in that regard, there are several types of culprits at the same time. The culprit must be packed with bush, grass, because we didn't have money to buy galvanized. That is a new invention. At the same time, we must go forward and continue to understand our culture and keep it alive. Thank you very much.
Caller, you're not going to tell me you know how to make hammer?
Sure.
Oh boy. You know how to make sarsaparilla too?
Sure.
I should have known better. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You also.
Okay, Mr. Nolan, you final.
Webbo, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to come in tonight and launch in my book, and I thank all those who are out there listening, and I appreciate the calls and so on, the support, and I hope that persons would get their copies of the book, and so that I could reorder another set of books so that I could get the information out. I think it's very important that I'm able to project this type of history to our younger people, and it also serves as a reminder to our older people where they could reminisce about what took place in those days and show their younger people, their children, what they had to do, comparing to what is taking place now. With the younger children, don't have much to do, but at the same time they don't appreciate the things that we had to go through. So thank you very much, and I look forward to getting this book circulated more and more so that people can see portion of the history of Nevis. And I also hope that many of our younger people will take the opportunity to write their stories, because everyone has a story.
Linnell Nolan, the book Growing Up in Nevis. Thank you for the copy, Mr. Nolan. Thank you for the fruits. I'm going to share them with some other folks, and thank you for being with us here on Thought That Get Results. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Bentley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mag. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. You all have a wonderful evening.
With all the power from the tower. This is the
Opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting